Leon was a teacher's nightmare. He was the kind of kid that just came careening through life, bullying, defiant, refusing to do his work, talking out of turn, never sitting in a seat when he was supposed to be. That kid was so ornery that even in the wintertime when the flu bug was knocking everyone else flat, he came to school every single day. The kid was so ornery that the flu bug didn't even want anything to do with them. He was the kind of kid that you just kind of hoped would come to school one day with a happy announcement, "We're moving to Chicago." But he never did. He just kept coming to school day after day after day after day, and I kept getting more and more and more frustrated with this kid because he was showing me up as a poor teacher because I didn't know what to do with them. I couldn't reach him. I couldn't help him. I remember one day he had done something and I walked over toward him and he went around behind the table. So then we were doing this dance around the table, and I just was so frustrated. It was a good thing the table was in there in the way, but I'm just wishing I could get my hands on this kid and just say, "Sit down, pay attention." And the Lord just dropped one of those little one-liners into my head and said, "Why are you so upset? Have you been watching? Why do you ask that question?" And as he began to work with me through that, he dropped another one-liner into my head that has been such a powerful tool in untangling many knotty relationship problems. He said to me, "A kid who causes trouble is a troubled kid. You're focusing on his behavior and you're so anxious to just get him squashed into the mold of sit down and do your work that you don't realize that what you're having is a window into his soul. You have a glimpse into the pain in his life. And if you'll submit that pain to me and come to me for wisdom in dealing with him, I'll help you. I'll help you to plant eternity into his heart." Well, that was a totally new concept. I was just kind of stunned by it at first. I mean, the kid's acting up, you get him to sit in the seat and do his work, right? But the idea that I would actually work with this child at an even different level. So I thought, well, first I'm supposed to just ignore the behavior and just be nice to him. Well, you know how that worked. And I was entangled in a counterfeit, because what God was wanting to do was to teach me to give honor to this young man, even in the midst of receiving dishonor. And I was interpreting it as being that I just had to be nice to him. I couldn't deal with his behavior by being nice to him. But God didn't want me to deal with his behavior by getting my hands around his neck and applying pressure. And so God has me in this place of saying, I want to teach you some different ways of looking at misbehavior and different ways of treating those who treat you with dishonor. So I began to learn that giving honor is not just being nice to somebody. And that when I have to confront and be very direct with someone, I can do it and still do it with honor. And that was kind of a slippery place for me to begin walking in. I got some insight into that when I read a book by Gary Smalley and John Trent called The Gift of Honor. And in it, John Trent, or Gary, I'm not sure which one, gives the definition of honor. It's a decision we make to place high value, worth, and importance upon another person by viewing him or her as a priceless treasure. And by granting that person a position in our lives worthy of great respect. Love involves putting that decision into action. Well, that's okay if the person is shaping up, right? But what if he's not? What if she's not? What if it's someone who's continuing to do the things that have irritated me forever? What if it's a kid who does not straighten up, who does not do what he's supposed to be doing? Mark Lowry is a comedian. Some of you have probably heard him. I read an article that he wrote one time. He said that he was so out of control when he was a kid that he had airbags on his baby buggy, and that he was 7 years old before he knew his name wasn't settled down. He said back in those days, they didn't know about ADD. They just called it BRAT. But he said one thing that was really important in shaping his life was that his parents treated him with honor, with respect. It wasn't that they didn't deal with his misbehaviors, but when he would come home with his lapels just filled with notes from the teachers describing the misdeeds that he'd gotten into that day, as his mother was tucking him in at night, she would say to him, I want you to know that there are not enough trees in the world to make enough paper, to write enough notes, to make us stop loving you. And that was a very powerful influence in his life in bringing him to the place he is now, where that whole craziness is somewhat focused, and he's a blessing to a lot of people. But giving honor is such a powerful tool because it works like this. If I make it okay internally to treat someone with disrespect because of how they treat me, then what I'm practicing is a skill that acts like a boomerang inside of myself. And it leaves me defenseless against the times when someone treats me with dishonor or disrespect. If my standards are that you should always be perfectly groomed, your hair should be perfectly coiffed, and it should never be out of place, your clothes should always be the latest style, your nylon should always be without runners, and perfect. Your appearance should always be perfect. And I practice making it okay internally to look down on someone who is not perfectly groomed. What happens if I accidentally get caught in a rainstorm? What happens if I step out of the car and the wind blows my hair? What happens if I get a runner in my stocking? I have no defenses. I have no defenses, and I'm devastated. Because the only thing I've practiced is making it okay to devalue someone who does not live up to my standards. But if, on the other hand, I've begun to partner together with God to bring about the highest good in another person, then when I see someone who doesn't live up to my standards, whatever they are, and I begin to think slightingly of them, God has access to me to say, what's happening here? And he begins to teach me how to give honor, how to give respect to that person, even if they don't live up to my standards. Now, does that mean then that I just throw out all my standards? No. I still had the standard for my little Leon that he sit down in his desk, at his desk when it was time to sit down at his desk. I had the expectation that he do the assignments that were given. I had the expectation that he not punch somebody in the nose when he's mad at them. I had the expectation that when we're in a circle having a discussion, that he is paying attention to what other people are saying. When he speaks with respect to other people. I had all those expectations of him, but the difference was, how did I deal with him when he did not meet my expectations? And God began to work in my heart to deal with those misbehaviors, those places where I needed to deal with him with great directness, with great clarity, but also with great respect. And to keep planting in his heart over and over and over, I need to deal with you about this, because if I don't, all of the gifts that you have to give to the world will be lost, and you're too valuable to waste. But see, so many times when someone treats us with disrespect, Satan is right there with a lie. It's because they see what a jerk you are. And so then the only way I know to defend myself against that is to make them more of a jerk than I am. And so I practice. I practice doing things that cut the other person down so that I'll be a little bit higher. And God says, I have a better way. I have a better way. I had a friend one time that I was very close to, but over a period of time, the relationship began to deteriorate. And my friend began to treat me with disrespect. She had gone into a kind of what I thought was a theological aberration. And she was so excited about this great new revelation and discovery of hers that she kept wanting to take me along with her. And I really treasured the friendship, but I couldn't go where she was going. And the pressure increased and increased and increased, that I needed to come along and go in this direction, or I was just totally out of it, and I was deceived, and I was, you know, the things that people say to you. And my first response, of course, out of my woundedness, was to just cut the relationship off. I mean, I don't need this kind of relationship. But God always intervenes. He says, well, let's see what we can do here. And what he began to teach me was to deal with great respect with my friend, even while still standing firmly that I cannot go where you're going spiritually. You're free to go where you're going. It's not my place to straighten you out or to argue you out of your position. But I can't go where you're going. I still care about you as my friend. I'd like to be friends with you. But I can't force you into that. Well, it was really interesting how the Lord began to work in me in terms of the decision I made about the interaction in the relationship. If she would call me up and ask me to go out for lunch, I couldn't make the decision yes or no based on how she treated me the last time we were together. Rather, it was that I needed to go to the Lord in each time. Lord, in this situation, should I go out to lunch? Lord, in this situation, how should I handle this? Lord, it was like a minefield walking through that relationship. And at any point, a misperception, a miscommunication, a miss anything would just lead into this great explosion. And it just seemed like this is crazy to stick in a relationship with a friend like this, and yet the Lord would not let me walk away. And the interesting thing is that out of that whole process of working through, the Lord began to show me places where a lot of the distress I felt in the relationship was because of all of the things we've been talking about, that there's something wrong with me. And if I think that differently than my friend whom I respect, then I must be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I am not worth as much. And if I am not worth as much, then, and it just keeps on going. And so God began to work through those places. And right in the midst of what on the surface seemed to be a very destructive relationship, God brought great, great healing. My friend eventually decided that if I was not going to go along with that theological position, that they really couldn't have anything to do with me anymore, being as deceived and wrong as I was. And so the relationship eventually sort of just went away. But in the meantime, you see, I had partnered together with God to bring about in another person the highest good. And that's the essence of honor. Honor is a decision we make to place high value, worth, and importance on another person by treating them as a priceless gift. And the essence of honor is partnering together with God, becoming God-centered, so that we can bring about with God the highest good in another person's life, regardless of how that person treats us or what mistakes they have made or are making at present. That requires a radical shift, because when someone rejects us, when someone treats us badly, and people do, there are times when our perceptions are skewed and someone really isn't treating us badly, but we think they are because of other stuff going on. There are other times when, hey, flat out, there's no other interpretation possible. And people do treat us badly. And it requires a radical shift of thinking to say, Lord, now in the midst of this, I want to submit my heart to you, so that anything that's just tangled up and being dragged along in this, it's in my heart, is set free. And then how can I respond to this person? What can I say? What can I do? How can I respond to this person to partner together with you to bring about the highest good in their life? And that's one of the plays, one of the offensive plays of the gospel. The thing that happens is that when we are in a relationship, or we have a friendship, or we're in a situation with a boss or a neighbor or a husband or wife or children where disrespect is unrelenting, and we keep making that choice over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's like a photograph of God gets developed in our heart. And so then when I blow it and I want to go to God and ask him to forgive me, and Satan comes and says, you're not going to do that again. You're going to just walk up to God and say, I'm sorry again, and you think he's going to forgive you again. And if the only thing I've practiced is making it okay throwing someone away who blows it over and over, then I have no defenses. But if I've partnered together with God to bring about the highest good in another person's life by conferring upon them the gift of honor, then when Satan comes to me and says, and I remember the times when I felt bitter and enraged and all of the things we feel when we're hurt by another person. And I go to God and I say, okay, so now this time it's okay to throw them away, right? I don't have to put up with this anymore, right? And God says, let me give you some grace. Let me give you some of my grace. And we receive that grace, and as it flows through us, it anoints our heart. It's like a healing balm that flows through us and out to the other person. And I can remember times when I've been furiously angry with someone, and I wanted God so badly. I wanted him to say, yeah, it's okay. Go ahead and just go ahead and walk away from this. And he did not do that. And he brought me face to face with his grace over and over and over. And when those times came that he melted my heart. I can still remember that anger, that self, me-centered anger melting away and being replaced with God's grace that had the highest good of the other person at heart. And And what a wondrous thing that was. And so when Satan tells me that God's not going to forgive me this time, I just pull out that photograph. Because you see, that's not me that responded to that person. There wasn't anything of that kind of response in my heart. And it was God's grace. And as God's grace comes in, changes me, and flows out to the other person, I get to see something of God's heart. The Bible talks about besetting sins. And one of my besetting sins is that because of this place, people are going to find out, and that I'm dumb and ugly and all of this, it's largely healed, but there are still a few little tentacles here and there. And one of the places where those tentacles can be pulled is with a store clerk. A store clerk is paid to treat me with respect. Now, if somebody who is paid to treat me with respect doesn't treat me with respect, what does that say about me? Okay? And so I get pulled into that, and I have a way with words. I'm not rude, you understand. I'm perfectly calm, but boy, did they know that they blew it. And I've gone out more than once out of a store, and the Lord said to me, well, that was quite a demonstration there. And well, they deserved it. Oh, really? And I don't know how many times I've had to go back and apologize. But I remember the Lord saying to me one time, I was muttering about this clerk who'd just been absolutely rude and indifferent and absolutely unwilling to bend and help in any way. And she was getting paid for helping me, and she wouldn't do it. And the Lord said, why are you so upset? Weren't you watching? Why do you always ask me that? Well, she didn't do this and this and this and this and this. Well, I know, I saw that. Why are you upset? And we keep going down to the place of, well, she's paid to treat me with respect. And if you can't even pay somebody to treat me with respect, then there must be something wrong with me after all. And the Lord said, I wonder how it would change your thinking if you knew that last night her husband walked out. This morning before she came to work, she got the diagnosis that, yes, it really is cancer. The clerk works for a boss who's rude and demanding and disrespectful. She's filled up to here with it, and she doesn't have anything else, and so she just spills it out on the other people. Or the customer who came in before you was rude and disrespectful to her, and she just happened to have an extra load of it to pass on. I began to revolutionize my way of thinking about other people. When someone treats me with disrespect and rudeness, the Lord is beginning to be able to speak to me right in the midst of that and put into me a heart of compassion as I have a window into their soul, a window into their own pain. The scripture says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If a person is speaking to me with disrespect and rudeness and rejection, what do I know about the abundance of their heart? It's filled with rudeness and disrespect and rejection. That's the only thing they have. And so what is my task? To give them some more? They already have enough. Okay? So my task is to partner together with God so that I can be a channel through whom His grace flows to a hurting world. But that requires a radical shift in my thinking. I have to shift from a defensive posture to an offensive posture. I have to shift from a temporary point of reference to an eternal point of reference. I have to shift from a me-centered existence to a God-centered existence. what's in this for God? What's in this for God? And the great thing about it is that it's like being the pitcher the milk is poured from, and while you're being the pitcher, you get to drink part of the milk. I mean, isn't that great? You're not just a static pitcher that God pours something in and then you pour it out, but you get to experience and know the grace of God in a far more powerful way than you would ever know if we just simply treated people the way they treat us. Who wants to do that? If I treat people according to how they treat me, I am forever at the mercy of other people's relationship with God. If that person has no relationship with God, what does that say? And Jesus said, I came into the world to set you free. And we have freedom. And part of that freedom is that I am not entangled in another person's sin. Another person's sin does not have dominion over me. We read the scriptures that say sin shall not have dominion over you, and we interpret it as our own sin won't keep making us do wrong things. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that translation or that interpretation. But it also has a broader interpretation that other people's sins do not have power over me unless I give it to them. Why should I let a godless person dictate my attitudes, the kind of day I'm having, my sense about myself? What kind of sense does that make? And it doesn't make any sense when we talk about it rationally, but we keep getting hooked into it. One of the ways that we can make that really powerful decision is that we make a choice that in terms of how I treat other people, I have zero tolerance for disrespect. And that doesn't mean that when I slip and treat someone with disrespect, that then I come back to this me-centered existence. Oh, how could I have done such a thing? Oh, I'm such a failure. Oh, no. The Bible says if we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And so I simply do the same thing as if I've just taken a bath and I go out and get dirty. I just come back and take a bath again. I don't stand outside bemoaning the fact that I got dirty. I go back to the bath. Because why am I going to stand out there all dirty and stinky saying, oh, I just took a bath in there, look, I'm all dirty, when there's a bath in there? Okay, doesn't make sense. So God says to us, every circumstance and event of our lives comes through His hand. It comes through the filter of His hand. It doesn't mean that He causes all the evil in the world, but it does mean that he has His hand of restraint in place, and that in every place where evil touches us, His agenda is to strengthen us, establish us, make us firm, so that the evil that other people choose has no power to carve and fashion and form our character. And He invites us through every circumstance and event of our lives to partner together with Him in that eternal project. May we hear His invitation. May we respond with great joy and excitement. May He bless us abundantly to that end.